afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Tony Browder, and welcome to another edition of the Browder File. I want to begin by thanking everyone for turning out to the WPFW 48th birthday celebration last Friday. It was a wonderful gathering, and I appreciate everyone being there. I'm sure a good time was had by all, and I look forward to celebrating the 50th anniversary in 2 years and all the other anniversaries to come. And the only way that we can continue to have these celebrations of this great broadcast station is with your continuous support. I do understand that times are becoming increasingly more difficult, with jobs being destroyed, with the economy being destabilized, but we do what we have always done best in times of adversity. We push on, we persevere, and we succeed. So I'm sure the WPFW will continue to exist and will only get better because these times demand that we bring more of ourselves or the best of ourselves to every situation that we're confronted with. I've got a wonderful guest today who is, I guess I can almost call you, brother, a modern day Imhotep. You're a brother who has his hands in many things. You are a master of multiple talents, and I trust that we're going to have an opportunity today on this show to explore some of the incredible things that you have done. And I'm sure if you strike me as a person who is always thinking, who is always moving forward. So I know you have some plans for the future. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that today. My guest this afternoon is Kamau Sadiki. Kamau is a engineer, graduated from Howard University School of Engineering in 1980. He's had a 38-year career with the Corps of Engineers. He retired in 2017, but he also has an equally stellar career as a scuba diver, right? He's really made a name for himself within our community through his work with divers, diving with a purpose. And so before we get into all of what you've done, brother, let me just let me welcome you to the Browder File. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing very well, Tony. It's great to be on your show, your incredible show that's disseminating some incredible information for the community. But I do need to set the record straight, right?
Sure, yes.
You know, you said modern Imhotep. So if I could just do 1/10 or 1,000% of what Imhotep has achieved, I would be satisfied. So
Well,
the Imhotep is too high for me to even gaze at, you know?
Well, I was going to call you a Renaissance man, but Renaissance makes me think of Eurocentric artists and thinkers. So Imhotep is my motto of the first Renaissance man, and you embody that. And the Renaissance, to me, is speaks to someone who is tapped into their genius and who excels in multiple disciplines. And you certainly have done that. So you may not want to wear that label, but I'm going to put it on you. And let's look at it as something for you to continue to live up to, right? If you don't mind.
Yeah, if you give it, brother, I'll embrace it. Thank you.
Okay, but thank you. So I want to start our conversation this afternoon by talking about you. Tell me about your early life. What put you on this path to do the incredible things that you've done?
Yeah, that's I have to admit, Tony, that's always been my struggle to talk about me. I always say this work is, of course, it's not about me. It's about elevating our people, and so, but I'll try to provide a little bit of context, at least, on what my inspirations have been.
Sure.
I was born and raised in the South, deep South, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw firsthand the vicious violence of racism, white supremacy, right? And so that stuck with me. It's a marker, still a marker on me, because my mom and family still suffers from some of that madness. So I had to figure out what was going on in the world, right? So seeing some of those incidents and so forth inspired me to to study, actually, to study and to acquire knowledge. And I gained inspiration actually from Muhammad Ali during
Mm.
the 70s when I was coming up. Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember, but he did a movie. He did a little acting in a movie. It was called Ali, I believe.
Hmm. I remember that movie.
Yeah, yeah. And the theme song that was written by the sister Linda Creed and
Hmm. Hmm.
Whitney Houston popularized it.
Right, George Benson, the greatest love of all. I
Yeah,
remember seeing that at a theater at the AFI Theater in Silver Spring.
yeah, yeah. So it's a beautiful. The lyrics is beautiful, right? And
Mhm.
there was a line in that that inspired me. It said, "No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity," right?
Yes. Hmm.
So yeah, the greatest love of all is in within yourself. So that was inspiration, man. But because of the abject poverty that I grew up in, my family struggle in cotton mills and so forth, I had very few options when I graduated from high school, other than going to work in a cotton mill. I say,
Mm.
hell no, I ain't gonna go.
All right.
But anyway, so I took the option of enlisting in the military. I did 3 years and almost got thrown in the stockade, but I got out unscarred, unscathed
Hmm.
during the Vietnam era. And so I leveraged that, to go to school.
Okay.
I went to school and went into a junior college engineering program. I exceeded there and almost got 4.0. And so that was recognized in this organization out of New York called the National Association for Minorities in Engineering. They gave me a full ride to go anywhere I want to
Okay.
study engineering. Yeah, and so I submitted applications and got accepted at Georgia Tech. I got accepted at I think Clemson University. I think even MIT, and of course I applied to Howard. And because of the previous experience in the junior college being the only darkness in the class, I said, forget y'all, I'm going to Howard. So I ended up at Howard, man, and just to kind of make the story a bit shorter. When I got there, it was August of '77, and then September of '77, the racist, vicious people in South Africa, they killed Stephen Biko. And that inspired me to get involved in the anti-apartheid movement and almost flunked out of engineering school because of being active in the movement. And but I made it through. As you mentioned, graduated in 1980 and went on to with a career with the Corps of Engineers. So
Okay.
that's just sort of history.
So I can assume then that you were one of rare Black men who excelled in math, right?
Ah,
You obviously had appreciation or a profound love for math.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It kind of came somewhat intuitive to me, actually.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, when I was in junior college, when I was in the army, actually, I took some engineering courses just to kind of prepare myself when I got out, and that was the time we was transitioning from slide rulers. You know what slide
Oh
rulers are?
yeah, I remember slide rulers, brother. I'm a little bit older than you are, so yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so that period from transitioning from slide rulers to electronic calculators.
Hmm.
And so my first calculator was the one that had, of course, the arithmetic functions on it, but it also had square root and square.
Yes, yes.
So I thought that was extremely fascinating. And actually, I still got those calculators when I was
Hmm.
in engineering school. So yeah, and so that inspired me in math, and it made me wonder, what did, people of African descent contributed to that space, to science and mathematics.
Sure.
And so I developed a presentation that I did for quite a number of years called the African Origins of Science and Mathematics, a New Paradigm for Scientific Thinking.
Hmm.
So I remember, Tony, I don't know if you recall, you came to one of our what's called the National Society of Black Engineers NASB conferences.
Yes, sir.
I think it might have been Orlando, Florida. And yeah, I saw you there. I think you might have just published the Browder Files.
So that would have been about 89,
Well,
89
yeah,
to
I think,
90.
yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. We sort of intersected then. But yeah, this sense of math, the sense of geometry, sense of how the physical world operated really fascinated me. And so I kind of dove a little deep into it to get a deeper understanding.
Well, brother, I have a confession to make. I've developed profound love and appreciation for engineering.
Mhm.
When I was a student, high school student in Chicago, I had aspirations of being an architect.
Mhm.
Freshman year in college, I majored in architecture, University of Illinois, but my weakness was always math. I just
Wow.
had this phobia of math, which I can trace back to my fourth grade teacher. And it took me years to get over that phobia, but I later transferred to Howard and changed my major to design, graphic design, and advertising. But while I was at Howard, I encountered a number of people who were in engineering. As a matter of fact, I think I may have first met you through a mutual friend, Akoso Reedy, Betty Reedy.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Of course, well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she was in graduate school at School of Engineering, if I'm not mistaken. And what I've come to appreciate about engineers is that engineering teaches you how to think. It teaches you how to problem solve. I've got several engineers in my family. I've got several close friends who are engineers. And what impressed me most about all of them, yourself included, is your ability to see through problems, right?
Mhm.
And find solutions where most people are baffled by
Yeah.
the problem itself. And that's a skill that I truly admire because it's something that we don't see enough of in our community. So that's also one of the reasons why I put you on that pedestal and place you up there in the pantheon of great Black thinkers like Imhotep, brother.
Sure, yeah, yeah. Appreciate that, Tony. Yeah, I mean, mathematics is basically the natural order of things, and we're confronted with daily challenges. But in order to resolve those, we have to have a deep understanding, context of what the challenge is, right? We have to deeply understand what the problem is before we try to resolve it, right?
Sure.
And the deeper we understand it, it helps you develop critical thinking skills as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
I think we can come up with better solutions. And the dilemma that we find ourselves in right now as people of Afro diasporic people, or Black folk, if we really do a deep analysis of how we got here, I think we can come up with solutions without the help of those that brought this issue about, the oppressors themselves. So most of these solutions are we're asking for validation, we're asking for
Yes, sir.
resources from the very folks that oppressed us. And it brings to mind, our great ancestor, Dr. John Henry Clark, in his quote about, no people in power is going to educate you to take that power away from them, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
if you're really educated, you will not ask for it, but you will take it.
Exactly.
So, so yeah, yeah. So those, the critical thinking skills, understanding math, understanding the physical world has been, very helpful to me. And I think, Tony, it's really an innate ability in all of us, you know,
Yes,
because
indeed.
of the Western system in which we've been educated. And they say math is kind of like up on this high escalon, and you need to have these special skills and capabilities. But, for me, there was nothing special, just observing the natural world,
Mhm.
right? There's mathematical expressions all through the natural world. And so the more you stay in connection with that, I think, the better you can understand the physical world and do critical analysis and solve critical problems.
Absolutely. Well, brother Kamau, I really became aware of you and your work, not through the work that you had done with engineering, but I believe you were living in Portland, Oregon at the time.
Yep.
And I remember Asa Hilliard was doing a lecture. He may have been here in DC doing a lecture, and he was talking about the Portland baseline essays and how
Yeah.
a group of people within the community in Portland had invited him out to help develop this curriculum to infuse African content in the curriculum. And if I'm not mistaken, you were a core member of the community organization that brought Dr. Hilliard out, and which his involvement led to the creation of the Portline essays. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, Baba Asa was sort of the lead consultant on that effort. And you know what's amazing, Tony? Like I mentioned, I went to school here at Howard in the late 70s, and we had several efforts around education here in DC.
Yes.
Not trying to remember the sister's name. She transitioned a couple of years ago. She was a poet. Anyway, she tried to work on infusing African-centered information into the DC public schools. If I call her name, you remember. She was a poet. She wrote this very powerful poem called Black Girl that I used to like.
It's not Rabia, is it?
Rabia, not Rabia, no, before Rabia.
Before Rabia, okay.
Walker. Her last name was Walker, I
Oh,
believe.
Abner Walker. Abner Walker. Yes,
Abbott,
she had an
yeah,
African Center
yeah,
School. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
sir. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
Abbott. So, but anyway, the irony here for me, Tony, is we tried those efforts here in DC, but when I went out to Portland, Oregon in 1980, the core group of Black folk that was really committed to dealing with the issue around education around in our community out there, and they was able to pull it off.
Yes.
There where out there where when I went out there, I increased the Black population by 200%. Right? It wasn't
Black
that
conscious population.
right.
Sure.
Yeah, it wasn't that many Black folks out there, so it was absolutely amazing. But it was all centered around the National Black United Front. We had a very strong chapter out there that was ran by this brother named Ronnie Herndon, who was a genius in his own right. And that core community, man, they came together, they coalesced and made some critical demands. And Ronnie was connected nationally with the National Black United Front, and someone suggested ASA coming out to kind of do a recon initial analysis, and it just grew from there. And with
Yeah.
ASA's connection, so ASA was the lead consultant. Dr. John Henry Clark dealt with social studies. Hunter Adams dealt with science and mathematics, and I was sort of like Hunter's co-consultant, local on the ground person out there in Portland, Oregon for science and mathematics. The brother out of Oscar Brown dealt with art and music.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, it was a bunch of folks, man. So they would come out, they would lecture. Even Ivan Van Sertima came out. They would come out, lecture, and present all this information. And then we just simply kind of codified it and organized it into a coherent curriculum and lesson plans for what ultimately ended up being the baseline essays.
And Portland, if I'm, yeah, that was a magical time, brother. And if I'm not mistaken, the Portland baseline essays became the model, the prototype, if you will, for African-centered education, because the movement was jump-started shortly after that in the early 80s, and then it spread like wildfire in the mid 80s before the opposition began to push back, and then the attacks came in the early 90s, and ultimately it was replaced by this thing called multiculturalism, which is now a derogative term. But it's interesting how things run cyclically, and it appears as though with all of the opposition to that thinking, that woke thinking, people are starting to wake up again and understand the need to have certain baseline essays in communities all across the country. So I trust that we are approaching a new era of Black awareness. And if that is the case, then once again, I have to acknowledge the role that you played in helping to set this in motion with, creating the environment that led to the creation of the Portland baseline essays.
Sure. Yeah, man. It's and you mentioned things being cyclical. I hope people in this current moment, really understands that history and go back and study that history and what happened and see that things are cyclical. And we was talking about problem solving earlier, how the system operates.
Yes.
We understand that what we're confronted with now was the same thing. We can go all the way back to Robert Smalls when he was working on education issues and creating public school systems and so forth. And we've always gone through these cycles because that's the way the system of white supremacy works, So yeah, if we do the critical analysis, and I think it was Malcolm, the brother we celebrated his 100th birthday this month, that said history is the best to reward us from our research, right? And so If the current generation just go back and do the analysis of what has happened before them and come up with strategies of how to push us forward, I think that would be very strategic, and we would be in a better place and avoid these cycles of continuing dealing with the same issues over and over again.
Mhm.
Um, you're a brand new granddaddy, and I'm a brand new granddaddy, and
Indeed.
I want our grandchildren to be dealing with these same issues. We don't want this cycle to reemerge where we, fighting to get information into the minds of our children. So,
Mhm. Well, I'm in the fight to do whatever it takes to ensure that our grandchildren and our great grandchildren will inherit a world that will acknowledge their contributions and will no longer put roadblocks in their way so that we can achieve the greatness that we were destined to achieve in this lifetime.
absolutely.
So look, let's talk about diving with the purpose,
Hmm.
because that's been, I can say that's your new career, and you're blazing a trail with this new career. So let's explore that and tell us about diving with the purpose, what the organization is, and share with our listeners some of the incredible things that you've done. By the way, for my listeners, we're talking to Brother Kamau Sadiki, who is a contemporary Imhotep in training. How about that? All right.
That's
Imhotep
exactly
in
how I
training.
go.
All
I
right.
go with that. Yeah, so Tony, maybe it might be helpful just a little bit more context how I got into scuba diving.
Sure.
Because I think it's very relevant to the conversation here. As we talked at the beginning there, I had a career in engineering, and I ended up back here in Washington, D.C. from Portland, Oregon, to lead the Corps of Engineers hydropower program. It's a multi-million dollar, $100 million program. And so I was traveling all over the country, for the last 12 years of my career before I retired. So anyway, I was coming back through the Dallas Fort Worth airport, coming back to DC. And on this particular trip, Tony, I had taken a book with me called Spirit Dive. And
Mm,
it was about this so-called vessel of enslavement. I don't use the word slave. That's another story. But anyway, um, about the Henrietta Marie. It was a
mm-hmm,
British vessel that crashed off the coast of the Florida Keys, um, and that offloaded after our ancestors in Jamaica was heading back, trying to get back to England with the loot that they made off the black bodies. So anyway, the book was called Spirit Dive by Michael Cotman. He's a former journalist with the Washington Post.
mm-hmm,
So when I got to the gate at the Dallas Fort Worth airport, there was an elderly gentleman sitting there. He was exhausted. He was nodding, just coming in and out of his sleep. And so I noticed something peculiar about him. He had these patches all over his jacket. And these were dive patches of places all over the world he had been. And so I eased up a little closer to him, and I noticed on his left shoulder, he had a patch that said Henrietta Marie. I said, wow, that's interesting. And so I waited for him to come out of his nod and struck up a conversation. And that gentleman's name is Dr. Albert Jose Jones, an incredible individual. Um, he started scuba diving back in 1956. You can imagine the issues that he was confronted with back then. So he said, forget all that. He established a black scuba diving club here in Washington, D.C. called the Underwater Adventure Seekers in 1959.
mm,
Just celebrated 65 years of an existence. It's still going very, very strong. Just
mm-hmm,
his genius. And so I struck up a conversation with him. He was very gracious and generous, and he talked about all his diving exploits and way been all over the world, et cetera, and gave me all this literature on diving and so forth. And so he asked me, well, Kamau, you interested in scuba diving? And I said, well, yeah, I've been thinking about it. I like the water, I like to be near water. He said, your timing couldn't have been better. We're going to start our training next week.
ah.
Yeah, I said, wow, okay. Said, come check us out. So they was training at Dunbar High School,
Mm-hmm,
AC. They had a
yes.
swimming pool over there. So I went over there, man. And so the rest is history. So Dr. Jones, I give all thanks and praises to him to kind of put him into context, Tony. I'm sure if I say, when we talk about scuba diving and so forth, if I say Jacques Cousteau,
Yeah.
right? You are
Mhm.
instant memories, right?
Right. Well, the guy I remember as a kid growing up, there was a show called Sea Hunt.
Yeah, yeah, Lloyd Bridges, but
Lord Bridges, yes, Sea
yeah,
Hunt.
yeah. But Lloyd Bridges, Jacques Cousteau, those are the white Dr. Jones, right?
Got it.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so matter of fact, Netflix has just created a documentary on his life and legacy called The Black Godfather of Scuba Diving,
Oh,
Dr. Jose
fantastic.
Jones. So that's going to start streaming soon. But anyway, he got me involved into scuba diving. He was very instrumental. He was doing some of the early work on these from his work on the Henrietta Marie. They eventually put a memorial down on the wreck site of the Henrietta Marie. Dr. Jones was very involved in that. And in 1992, I think it was 93.
Mm-hmm.
And so he began diving in West Africa on these shipwrecks and so forth and so on. So he was somewhat instrumental in what we call today diving with a purpose, an
Sure.
organization that was co-founded by Ken Stewart and his archaeologists down in southern Florida. So diving with a purpose, Tony, is essentially an organization that trains certified scuba divers how to do underwater archaeological documentation and surveys on shipwrecks. And so looking at the history, we say, wow, there was some 12,000 ships that was involved in what I call the transoceanic era of African enslavement. I do not say Atlantic slave trade, again, trying to decolonize my thinking around that word slave because it diminishes our ancestors every time we use that word.
Sure.
So 12,000 ships involved in the trade, Tony. We know from the historical record there was about 1,000 or so that was involved in wrecking event, but there was many more. And so
Mhm.
of those 1,000 or so, we're only aware of about 15 of them. 12,000 ships, Tony, right? Of a phenomena that has changed the world. The whole world has benefited from the enslavement of black bodies, but yet we only have the knowledge of about 15 of these vessels. And I can humbly say that I've worked on at least 6 of those 15. So DWP takes as its mission to document these wrecks, to bring these stories back into memory. Each one of those vessels has an incredible story to tell. And not so much the ship itself, but the black bodies that was on those ships, our ancestors, right?
Absolutely.
Bring their stories forward. No ancestor want to be forgotten, right?
Mm-hmm.
You forget your ancestors, your descendants will forget you, right?
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So we want to bring those stories to the forefront and tell the stories uh, of uh, of the people that was impacted from these vessels, the descendant communities who are still suffering from the epigenetic trauma of the
Mhm.
ancestors on these vessels. You and I are also suffering from that as well. So we want to tell those stories, and that's what DWP is all about. So we have 2 sort of programmatic areas. One is in underwater archaeology. The other one is in on the environmental side is coral reef restoration.
Mhm.
The coral systems around the world is in distress, and we're not consciously fully aware of it. Well, however, our life is very much dependent on it. Every second breath that you and I have just taken came from those coral reef systems, but they are deteriorating. So the mission of DWP is to train certified divers, to do this work, and more importantly, to kind of queue up young people to do this work. We have a youth program called Youth Diving with a Purpose, and we got some incredible young people coming through the system to carry on after we so-called hang up our fins.
Sure. Sure. Well, let me do this. Let me reintroduce you. You're listening to the voice of Kamau Sadiki, who is a multi-talented African man who is grounded in his history and culture, and he's a person who excels at everything he does. I'm Tony Browder. You're listening to the Browder File show. So, Kamau, another interesting point that I don't want to escape our audience is the fact that you're a Black man who grew up in the South, and you overcame insurmountable odds to achieve success in a profession where there aren't enough of us,
Yeah,
let alone black men, black people, but black men.
yeah,
I don't know the numbers, but I would imagine, given the percentage of Black women in HBCUs, that there's more Black female engineers than
Yeah.
there are Black male engineers. And those numbers are reversed within the white community. So you are I hate using this word, a minority within a minority within a minority, but you've done all these incredible things. You mentioned that you're in the process now with Diving with the Purpose, DWP, of training the next generation who will replace you when you put down your fins. So what does that process entail? And share with our listeners any information that you can, so that if any parents are listening or uncles are listening and would like to get some young folk involved in your work, let them know how they can do that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that, Tony, because I think it's this up and coming generation of young folks is really going to make a serious effort in resolving some of these issues we're confronting with now. So we got to prepare them. If folks are interested, I just direct them directly to the website, divingwithapurpose.org. We're a 501c3 organization. And there's information there about our programming and how you
Can
can
you repeat the website again? Diving with a Purpose?
Diving with a Purpose, all one, all connected, small letters, .org.
.org.
Purpose.org. Yeah. And that's information about the broader programs and information there about our youth programming as well. Youth Diving with a Purpose. Matter of fact, Tony, just last week, I just got back from South Africa in Durban. That's an incredible program going on there that we're partnering with called Nature, Environment, Wildlife Filmmaking, where this brother and sister in South Africa in Durban there, they have got this incredible program going where they bring African youth from all over the continent, Tony, and they converged in Durban to use the medium of filmmaking to tell our stories, right? He has this mantra says that if you want to change the story, you got to change the storyteller, right?
That's true. No denying.
Absolutely. So they, folks like to use these terms, but they shifting the narrative. You see these films about Africa and so forth is basically from filmmakers from Europe and other places, but Africans can tell their own story, right? It's an incredible program, and so I was absolutely blown away with the energy and excitement and enthusiasm of these young folks. And so we're trying to partner with them, and we're going to be taking some of our young folks there in this coming July as well to have a cross-cultural experience and also pick up on some of the techniques and processes they're using to help tell our stories. But we're nurturing these young people to empower them to be able to carry our story forward.
You were just recently in New York at the UN. So what were you doing at that?
Yeah. I just got back earlier this morning from the UN. They were having they're moving into the second decade of the Forum on People of African Descent. So the UN has this forum on people of African descent. And so I went up to provide some comments to the forum on the question of reparations. And our local sister Nkechi Taifu was there. She did a very powerful message too. Um, to deliver some comments and offer recommendations on how the forum should focus on this issue of reparations as it relates to artificial intelligence and other issues, young people and other issues that they had panelists on. So myself and a good friend, Hannah Adams, we were there to provide testimony. But as things go, there's a lot of us there, and when we get a lot of us together, things happen. So, unfortunately, Hannah nor I was able to give our testimony, although we was prepared at the mic, ready to go. But they cut it off because
Really?
time issues, people going beyond time, and so forth and so on. We're gonna submit it in writing, and hopefully it can have some sort of impact. So yeah, that's going on now. I think they wrap up. It was a 4-day situation, but I can only stay 3 days. I had to get back here. So Yeah, that's what that was about. So the Forum on the People of African Descent in the UN is trying to come up with some policies and strategies going forward and sort of stake out a position or a framework on this whole question of reparations of diasporic people.
Okay. You know, earlier in our conversation, you made reference to your meeting Dr. Jones at an airport in Texas, and he was your Jegna. He got you involved in diving. You mentioned that Netflix is going to do a series on his life.
Well, actually, no, it's not a series. They've already produced it. It's in the can, and it's
Mm,
made. It's a documentary film.
okay,
It made the circuit at some of the film festivals, won a few awards, and I think right now they're trying to get it plugged into some programming slots on Netflix so it can start streaming
got
on.
it.
So I don't think it's streaming now, but again, it's called The Black Godfather of Scuba Diving: The Life and Legacy of
Okay.
Dr. Albert Jose Jones.
Well, 3 years ago, you were in a documentary that appeared on Netflix, I
Uh,
believe, called Descendant.
that's correct. Yeah.
So tell us about that experience and the your diving experience related to the Clotilda.
Yeah. It was called Descendant, and it's about the descendants of this vessel of enslavement called the Clotilda. The Clotilda brought 110 African bodies into the U.S., into the Mobile Bay, Alabama, back in 1860. So if I say 1860, Tony, we should instantaneously be able to put that in historical context, right?
Sure. The beginning of the Civil War, correct?
Right at the front door, yeah, right
Mhm.
at the front door, the beginning of the Civil War. It was real tensuous time. So the racist that pulled this off, Timothy Mayer, who was a wealthy shipbuilder, he wasn't from Alabama, he was from Maine. He was a New Englander that moved down there. So that shows the complicity of the North and the South and this whole dichotomy about the North being somewhat pious and altruistic and the South being enslavers. They was all enslavers.
Sure.
So the slave vessels was built in the North. But anyway, that's another story. So this guy, Timothy Mayer, said that these northerners trying to influence our life way down here. So he made a bet that I can bring some Africans into the U.S. and enslave them under the nose of the federal government.
Mhm.
And he
And
pulled.
let's provide some context to that because the importation of Africans was banned, what, January 1, 1808.
That's
So it was
correct.
illegal to bring
Illegal.
any more Africans in, but the process of enslavement continued until the end of the Civil War in 1865. So this man from Maine decided on a whim that he could bring some more Africans in and circumvent the law, right?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
absolutely correct. It was, quote, illegal. I can't. And
Yeah.
I know if you go technically, how can you make the enslavement of people legal, right? But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's another question. It was illegal. He was running the risk of being hung, to being executed if he was caught. And so that the law, it was the so-called Anti-Slavery Law, Privacy Act of 1820 that made it illegal to import Africans into the U.S. with the intent to enslave them. So during that whole period, more than 1 million Africans crossed the Atlantic, you know, when it was, quote, illegal, right? Um, so he was able to pull it off in 1860. But during that 45 year period, not only one person, one individual was executed for importing Africans into the U.S. Um, and that was done out of for political expediency in 1862, when in the midst of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln uh, executed this guy who was the captain of this boat called the Camargo that came into Brazil. These stories can get big, Tony. There's a
Sure.
lot of stories here. Uh, but anyway, back to the Clotilda. He pulled it off 1860, brought these Africans into the U.S., actually enslaved them for a small period of time, but they was able to after the Civil War to be set free. And they was just like most of the Africans that were enslaved, just let go, no compensation, no,
Mm-hmm.
you're on your own now
Mm-hmm.
after 100 years of enslavement.
Yeah, we just recently celebrated Emancipation Day in DC, and the same
Right.
thing happened. 3,000 Africans were given their freedom, but their enslavers were compensated.
Right,
Not too
absolutely.
much has changed.
Yep, yep. That's the way the system of white supremacy operates, man. They compensated enslavers, but not those who were enslaved. So anyway, in 1867, these Africans from West Africa, they're primarily from Nigeria, but they left the port of Ouidah, Benin, to come
Mm.
to the U.S. They petitioned the enslavers to help them out, give them at least a small piece of land. And the dude said, "Yo, you out of your mind, man. I came here to make money off to enslave you. I don't want to give you no land." So anyway, they was resourceful. They saved their money. They was able to purchase some land, and which is now today called Africatown, north of Mobile, Alabama. And they established that property, and they have prospered. They practiced their own culture, spoke their own language. They established a community, a vibrant community with churches, stores, etc., homes, and yeah, it still exists today, but facing some extreme challenges because the government and the city of Mobile, man, it's just horrendous in terms of the things that they did. They started leasing land around Africatown to these big industries and have created environmental hazards and pollution. Um, they're suffering from economic racism and exploitation as well. And so they ran a major highway right smack down through the community that really almost destroyed the community, but they're still there. All these forces was coming at them to destroy them, but they still have the story there to tell. And so I was part of the team that worked on the ship, the Clotilda. Um, so I can just quickly put it into context here. So when the ship brought these 110 into Alabama, the federal government supposed to have been chasing them, looking for them, right? Because they had caught wind of this story, but they didn't find them. So the captain told the Timothy Mear told the captain William Foster to take the ship upriver and burn it. And so he took it upriver, tied it off near the properties of the Mears on the Mobile River, and he set it afire. But the ship sank before it was fully destroyed, and now it sits at the bottom of the Mobile River. And so I was a part of the initial teams that did the documentation, archaeological documentation of the vessel. And what makes the Clotilda so critically important, Tony, is that, as I mentioned, I worked on a number of these wrecks, and the ones that we're aware of, they're all broken up and scattered across a wrecking landscape, right? But the Clotilda, you can actually see the outline of the hull of a ship. You can actually say, "Oh, wow, that's a ship," even if you don't have no archaeological experience, right?
Sure.
Not only that, you can see structures of the ship. There's walls of what we call bulkheads, forward bulkheads, aft bulkheads, and you can actually see the actual space, the cargo hold, where the
Mm.
110 people endured the crossing of the Atlantic. And I dove in that space, Tony.
Well, let me ask you this, man, because I'm hearing you and I'm feeling you. What is it like to be underwater in an underwater graveyard in the space where these African bodies were once held? What do you feel when you're down there, brother?
Oh man, I'm getting goosebumps now, Tony, just thinking about it. Um, you
Mm.
know, we have to do the science, right? We have to do the archaeology. And, we measure, we analyze, and we interpret and so forth. But there's another whole dimension here
Absolutely.
that archaeologists, particularly colonial archaeologists, mention, and it's a spiritual dimension.
Hmm.
We are connecting to our ancestors, and they are speaking to us.
Yeah.
They are speaking clearly to us, giving us direction, but, they're not speaking to us in English or Portuguese or Spanish.
Hmm.
And we can't listen with our ears, right? We have to listen with our hearts.
Absolutely.
And we will begin to understand and hear them. And that's the experience that I've had, very tangible and real, Tony.
Hmm.
2013, when I dove off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa, on the South Jose Paquete de Africa, this Portuguese vessel that was bringing over 500 of our ancestors, trying to get them into Brazil. And it's the experience I experienced on the Clotilda as well. As I mentioned, I dove into that cargo hold. And um, a dear friend of mine, Sabrina Johnson, we connected, and she said, Kamau, if you're going to dive into that vessel Clotilda, given the experience you had off the coast of South Africa, you have to find a way to speak to these ancestors to let them know that you're going to be in that space and connect with them. And she said, let's compose an ancestral prayer. Mm-hmm. And she did most of the composition here. And I just added a few twists and turns here. So I'd like to just share that poem, that prayer, Tony, to your listeners. And
this
is the prayer that I recited before I did my first dive into that cargo hold. It is called Ancestral Prayer for Clotilda First Dive, reviving the spirits who traveled on the Clotilda. Beloved ancestors, your voices have been quiet for 162 years, but your silence ends now. Your voices and memory are lifted now from this wretched vessel through us, and we welcome you to speak through us. Our connection will never be broken. We are because of you. Thank you for reaching out to us. Blessings to your spirit always. You know, I made Ashe. Oh. And so, Tony, when I went into that space, I have some 1,600 odd dives in the open ocean. So I know a little bit about scuba diving and being balanced in the water, what we call peak buoyancy. But when I went into that space, I began to tumble and flip for about 10 to 15 minutes. It was very turbulent. And ultimately, I was able to get my equilibrium back and get balanced. And I just took it as an introduction to the tremendous experience that our ancestors had crossing the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. And we did the evaluation. I investigated, evaluated the space. There are some posts there that the floor that our ancestors came on, laid on when they was crossing the Atlantic. The actual floor is gone, but the post that supported the floor is still there. Sure. What's called a half deck as well, where they build up a half deck and they can put people on these half decks. Mm-hmm. Some of that structure is still there as well. Most of the space, about 50% of it, is filled up with sediment now. And so I've probing some of the sediment, and I felt a metal piece down there. It was just a metal rod. We're not sure what's the significance yet. And there was other pieces in there that was relative to the structure of the ship. And so after about 45, 50 minutes, we decided to surface, me and a buddy, my dive buddy, I was leading the dive. And I just remember, Tony, when I came up and broke the surface of the water, first thing that came in my mind was the first breath of fresh air that our ancestors experienced after 3 months being in the hold of that ship. Mm. And then I ended the dive. So it was an incredible experience, Tony. The emotions are very, very deep. It connects you very organically with our ancestors. You can feel them. The essence of our ancestors are embedded in these artifacts and this materiality from that horrific period we call the Transatlantic era of African enslavement. So we can connect through them through this materiality, these artifacts. And so I'm supposed to be going to Dakar, Senegal here next month to talk about this, the tangible and intangible aspects of these artifacts, this materiality. There's a big conference called Archaeology and the Black Experience at the University of Sheikh Anta Diop next month. And just talking about this whole ideal of the spiritual mention of archaeology.
So Kamau, man, this is such beautiful work that I know you were born to do this work. You know, Dr. Welsing often said that each of us has a cosmic assignment, and you obviously, brother, were born to do this work. You're the right spirit with the right talent, the right capabilities, and that I see the hands of the ancestors, man, you know, surrounding you and protecting you to ensure that you do this work for the benefit of everybody who's coming behind you. So bless you, brother. I really, really do appreciate what you've done and what you continue to do.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that, man. But there is a actually a DC connection. As we said earlier, I went to school here in Howard.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came into this community, there were elders in this community. Baba Ngoma, the drummer, master drummer, uh,
Yes.
uh, Baba Refu, and, and
Mm.
and others. And so when I was working in this community, um, Baba Refu and a few others came to me and said, you're a very quiet brother, but you work hard, right?
Mhm.
Said your name should be Kamau, quiet warrior. It
Ah,
stuck.
okay.
Yeah. So I legally changed my name about 40 some odd years ago to
Hmm.
Kamau.
And that speaks to the essence of what DC is. DC is a very special place.
Yeah.
It's unique in this country and unique in this world for a variety of reasons. But there's a strong cultural community here that has produced some incredible souls, man. And we're blessed that you're here. As a matter of fact, you were talking about coming from South Carolina to Howard University, and I recall another brother from South Carolina who came to Howard who also impacted the world, and that was Chad Bozeman, right?
Ah, right.
His story in some regards sounds similar to yours in that he had witnessed incredible hardships and he was determined not to follow in those footsteps and he wanted to do something different. And he in I've heard people talk about his mission and his vision when he was at Howard. He obviously was touched by the ancestors, and he knew when he was a student at Howard that he was going to play that role of
Right.
T'Challa. I can't even speak now. My
Okay.
tongue tied. But he knew he was going to play the role of the Black Panther, and it can't. It makes me feel as though this idea that Dr. Welsing put forth about us having a cosmic assignment, and there are souls that come here into the world knowing that they're destined to do something, to leave their mark on the world. And I see that in certain people, brother, and you've exhibited that, man. So I want to thank you for being true to your calling, man.
Sure, absolutely. We all are seeking purpose, and once we find it, you know the passion, and you have to stick to it. But yeah, Chad, he did an incredible role with Black Panther. But we should also mention in the same breath, he brought forward the spirit of some powerful ancestors like Jackie Robinson and James Brown, and those
True.
were, I mean, very authentically. I mean, he really embraced the spirit of ancestors when he was acting, and so.
Mm-hmm. And, as a matter of fact, I found in talking with some colleagues who worked with him when he was at Howard that he had written a play called Isis and Osiris.
Oh, wow.
And it was only performed once, I think somewhere in Pittsburgh, maybe. But the brother came from South Carolina. He was immersed in the cultural community at Howard University. He worked at Rafu's bookstore selling books. So he was prepared for that role as T'Challa, and he did his job, and then he left. Right?
Yep. Yep.
So when you look at someone's life in that broader perspective, you realize that we all come here for a purpose. And sometimes when we fulfill that purpose, it's time for us to move on, but we're forever impacted by
Yep.
that purpose.
Yeah, yeah. You leave that very powerful legacy. Actually, Chad grew up about 40 miles from where I grew up.
Okay. Okay. Well, I give thanks for those ancestors who were your family members and colleagues whose soul obviously still hovers around that space and interacts with souls that are willing to acknowledge them and receive them so that they can be blessed to move forward into the world and expand their impact. And that's certainly what you have done. Well, look, man, we're just about out of time, and
Mm.
I've only touched on a fraction of the things that I wanted to talk about with you. So we will have to bring you back because it's so refreshing for me to have a conversation with a brother who's humble, who's brilliant, who's courageous, who has vision. And we need to bring those models of African manhood forward and put them out on Front Street so our young people, male and female, can see that there are other ways that we can negotiate this space here in America and achieve success and make our families proud. So I just want to thank you, man, for everything that you've done, that you have continued to do. And I know that the world is certainly a better place because you're in it, right? And you're not shy. As a matter of fact, yeah, and I know we got to close in a second, but one of the things that I appreciated about your role in the film Descendant was when you all were sitting on the ship and you were talking to the descendants of the white owners, and you were the only one who spoke truth to power, brother. You know, maybe it's because you weren't from Mobile, or maybe it's because, you know, your ancestors said, look, now's the time to speak up, and you spoke up.
More of the latter, brother. Ancestors, yeah.
And the filmmaker kept that in the film. That was a powerful moment, brother. So I thank you for that. And I certainly will have you back on a future show so we can continue this discussion, because yours is a voice that needs to be heard often, and needs to be replicated within our community. So Kamau, you know, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you being with us. And Khalil, you know, what I want you to do when you take us out with Maurice White, Earth, Wind and Fire, talking about it's all about love. Let's think about love from the context of what Kamau shared with us about Linda Creed's song that George Benson sang in a film about Muhammad Ali. The greatest love, learning to love yourself, is the greatest love of all.
Yeah.
And when you love yourself, you bring out the best within you. So thank you, my brother.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your work as well. And we collectively, we create the power to move our people forward.
Absolutely. Love you, brother.
I love you too, brother. Peace.
Take care. And I'll be back to you all here next week on WPFW. This is Tony Browder saying peace.